You can be surrounded by 40 people and still feel like the last person on Earth. It happened to you recently. A party, a train carriage, an office kitchen, a wedding where you knew half the room by name. The light was warm, the noise was friendly, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, a cold hollow opened under your ribs and would not close. Then you went home. You shut the door, put your phone face down, sat alone in a quiet room, and felt fine. Doesn't that seem backwards? More people should mean less loneliness. That is the arithmetic almost everyone runs on. Get out more. Say yes to the invitation. Fill the calendar. But your nervous system is not counting people, and once you see what it is actually counting, the crowd stops looking like a cure and starts making perfect sense as a trigger. The real answer is stranger than being an introvert. It has almost nothing to do with how many humans are in the room. Start with what loneliness actually is, because you have probably been using the word wrong your entire life. Loneliness is not being alone. Being alone is a fact. It is a number, a count of bodies in a space. Loneliness is a gap. It is the distance between the connection you have and the connection you expected to have. And like every gap, it can only be measured against something. Sit by yourself in a quiet room, and there is nothing to measure against. Stand in a crowd of laughing people, and your brain is suddenly holding a ruler. The neuroscientist John Cacioppo spent 3 decades on this question, and his conclusion sounds almost too simple to be worth 30 years. Loneliness is hunger. Not a character flaw. Not a verdict on how likable you are. Not evidence that something is wrong with you. It is a biological signal. Built the same way thirst and hunger are built. Hunger tells you the body is short on food. Loneliness tells you the body is short on people who know you. The feeling is unpleasant on purpose, because unpleasant is the only thing that makes a signal work. You do not drink water because you admire water. You drink because thirst is annoying. Cacioppo found something else, though, and this is the part that explains the party. A lonely brain does not go quiet. It goes on alert. His work showed that loneliness flips your attention into threat detection mode. You scan faces faster. You read a neutral expression as a cold one. You notice the extra half-second someone takes to answer you and quietly file it as rejection. He called it hypervigilance for social threat, and your ancestors needed it desperately, because if your standing in the group was slipping, you had to know about it immediately. But look at what that means today. The environment with the most faces in it is the environment that gives the alarm the most raw material. In your bedroom, there is nothing to scan. At the party, there are 40 ambiguous signals a minute. Now, the experiment that shows how deep this goes. Naomi Eisenberger, a neuroscientist at UCLA, put people inside a brain scanner and had them play a deliberately boring computer game called Cyberball. You toss a ball back and forth with 2 other players on the screen. That is the whole game. Then, partway through, the other 2 players stop throwing to you. Nothing else happens. Nobody insults you. Nobody leaves. Nobody says a single word. The ball simply stops coming your way. And in the scanner, one of the regions that lights up is the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, part of the same circuitry that registers physical pain. Being left out of a pointless game by strangers you have never met and will never meet registers in the tissue of your brain as something close to being hurt. Sit with how cheap that trigger is. Not betrayal, not abandonment. A ball, not thrown, by pixels on a screen. Later researchers went further and told participants the other players were just a computer program. No humans involved at all, and the sting still showed up. Why would evolution build a brain that bruises this easily? Because for almost the entire history of your species, that bruise kept you alive. Robin Dunbar, the anthropologist, is famous for a single number, 150. That is roughly the size of the human group your mind is built to hold, the number of people you can keep in stable relationship at one time. But the part most people forget is the shape underneath the number. Dunbar found layers. Around 5 people you are genuinely intimate with. Roughly 15 you would grieve hard for. About 50 in the wider working band. Then 150 at the outer edge, all of whom know your name, your parents, your temper, and the story of the time you got it badly wrong. For a couple of 100,000 years, that was the entire world, and it barely changed across a lifetime. The same faces at your birth, at the fire, at your death. You did not meet strangers. A face you did not recognize was not a neighbor. It was a rival band, a raiding party, a reason to pick up something heavy, and you could not leave. Christopher Boehm, who studied the politics of small-scale societies, described how ruthlessly hunter-gatherer bands police their own members, and their weapon is not usually violence. It is exclusion. Gossip first, then ridicule. Then being talked about instead of talked to, being left out of the plan, and at the very end of that ladder, being sent away. Being sent away meant no share of the meat, nobody to watch your children, no shelter when the season turned. Exile was not an emotional event. It was a slow physical death sentence, and every single person in the band understood that. So the pain Eisenberger measured in that scanner is not an overreaction. It is an inherited alarm, calibrated for a world where being dropped from the group killed you, and it has never once been recalibrated. But there was something else in that ancestral world, and its absence is the thing you actually felt at the party. The anthropologist Polly Wiesner recorded conversations among the Jew/Hwansi of the Kalahari and did something quietly brilliant with them. She sorted the talk by time of day. Daytime conversation turned out to be mostly practical and mostly friction. Land, meat, who owed what to whom, complaints, jokes with an edge in them. Then the sun went down, the fire was lit, and the content changed almost completely. At the fire, people told stories. They talked about the absent and the dead. They talked about relatives 3 camps away. They sang. They laughed for a long time. Wiesner described firelit talk as the place where the group's inner life was made and remade. Night after night after night. That is what your brain is expecting and cannot find, not proximity. Being known out loud on a regular schedule by people who will still be there tomorrow. Now go back into that room. 40 people. Music loud enough that you lean in to hear. Everyone in a state of light performance, including you. You say the same 4 sentences about your job for the 4th time. Someone asks how you are, and you both quietly agree that the honest answer is not on the table. The signal density is enormous. Faces, voices, laughter, the constant background arithmetic of who is talking to whom and for how long. And the specific thing your nervous system came here scanning for arrives in a quantity of exactly 0. Nobody in that room learns anything true about you. You learn nothing true about them. Your brain does not experience that as a neutral evening out. It experiences a group operating at full volume with your name missing from it. And that is almost precisely the ancestral signal for slipping status, for standing outside the circle, for the first rung of the ladder that ends in exile. So the alarm fires. Right on schedule, in a warm room, at a party you were invited to and wanted to attend. Alone in your quiet room, none of that is running. There is no group to be excluded from. The alarm has nothing to point at, so it sleeps. And you mistake that silence for being fine. So should you just stay home? No. And here is where this gets uncomfortable, because Cacioppo's hypervigilance has a sting in the tail. Loneliness makes you a worse reader of other people, right when you most need to be a good one. You walk in already braced. You take a distracted glance as dislike and a short reply as a verdict. So you protect yourself. You talk a little less. You leave a little earlier. You decide you are just not a people person. Every one of those moves is completely reasonable, and every one of them widens the exact gap that started the feeling. That is why loneliness is so sticky. It is not a weakness in your character. It is a well-built alarm system that has started feeding itself, which points straight at the shift, and the shift is not get out more. Stop trying to be around people. Start letting one person know one true thing. That is the entire change. In a single conversation this week, say one unperformed sentence to one person. What you are actually worried about. What you actually loved this week. The thing you would normally sand down into, yeah, busy. You know how it is. Then ask them one question that the party version of them could not answer and stay quiet long enough to get a real reply. You are not doing this to be liked. You are doing something far more precise. You are supplying the exact input your ancestral wiring spends all day scanning for, which is evidence that you are known by someone who will still be there next week. That is what the fire circle delivered every single night for 200,000 years, and it is the one thing that a room containing 40 people cannot manufacture at scale, no matter how good the music is. Notice what that means about the size of your problem. You are not short 40 friends. Dunbar's innermost layer is about 5 people, and the loneliness research keeps landing in the same place. What closes the gap is depth, not head count. One conversation in which you were not performing will do more for that hollow feeling under your ribs than a month of fully booked weekends. You are not underpopulated. You are underwitnessed. And you are not broken for feeling that hollow at a good party. You are running a 200,000-year-old alarm tuned for a band of 150 faces you had known since birth, inside a world that hands you 40 strangers and calls it a social life. The alarm is not lying to you. It is using the only vocabulary it has, and that vocabulary was written for a world in which you had never once in your whole life been surrounded by people who did not know your name. So the next time it happens, in the middle of the noise, you will know what it actually is. Hunger. Not a verdict. You can be surrounded by 40 people and still feel like the last person on Earth because your brain was never counting people at all. It was counting who knows you. And tonight, that number can start changing with one honest sentence.